Uh, this is called the Gladiators game. You know, thumbs up, thumbs down. This is my invoice. Should I give it to him now or wait till y'all? This is my invoice. Should I give it to Jack now or wait?
I'd give it to him now. That way he can graduate.
He might run out the back door.
Well, this is the last one. This is about advising strategies to enhance your graduation rates. And I'm excited about this one, so I want your feedback after this. When Jack told me I was doing advising strategies, I kind of cringed. And the reason I cringed is that you've got a great source of very good research on advising strategies down at Sinclair. And so I feel like a minor league player that's been sent to play in the neighborhood of a pro team. And so I'm a little nervous on this one. So again, after this is over, if it sucks, come up to me, just whisper in my ear. But I really want feedback on this one because I totally redid this one. I really hope I'm on point, and if I'm not, and I've totally screwed you up for the day, I'm sorry, but I'd like to hear so that the next school doesn't get impacted. But thank y'all again for allowing me to do this. Pop's Insight. This is my last story of the day. This is my father. I'm named after him, and he's named after his grandfather, so I'm the third. My father loves me unconditionally, both me and my brother. He's really proud of us. In fact, here's a picture of me with my father. Love him to death. But it's really clear when I talk with my father. He's been a lifetime rancher. He really doesn't clearly understand what I do because I no longer teach. I haven't taught since, that's going to tell you how old I am. Let's say it was in the early 80s, okay? It was the last time I taught at a community college and at a university, and he understood that. He doesn't really understand kind of what administrators do, and I think that may be a lot of people at times. And so one Christmas I go home, and I'm really proud because I've shared with y'all before, we at Jacksonville, we had a 39.9% fall-to-fall retention rate in our workforce programs. And we had just broke 60%. And to me, it felt like the weight of the world had suddenly been lifted off my shoulder. I felt like we were moving in the right direction. I could breathe. I wasn't obsessing about it. I wasn't running S-curve generators on every course in the world. And so Christmas, I was home with my pop, and he said, well, how's things going? And I said, well, man, we really just went boffo and got this 60% retention rate. And he looked puzzled. And he said, son, what's the 60% retention rate? And I said, well, Pop, we retain fall to fall 60% of the population that we had. And my father paused and said, so your death loss rate, which is what they use in ranching, was 40%. And I went, yeah. And literally my voice went like that, yeah. And my father asked a really good question, or made a really good statement. Son, if I lost 40% of my herd, I'd go bankrupt. And honestly, you know, I've heard that analogy before, but coming from my father, suddenly a light bulb went off. And, you know, when we lived on the ranch, when an animal died, you know, by the time I was 12, I was posting cows. So I'd post a cow to find out what was causing that death so we could assure that it wasn't going to happen to other cattle. And it made me think, are we posting these students? That's not the right way to look at it, and probably with the cameras running, it should be used some other way. But really, were we evaluating really why this student left? You know, my father was like the college president of the ranch. He wanted to know why Bessie, cow number 91389, died. And imagine for a moment if we worked at schools where the college president would pick up the phone and say, "Hey Jack, student 91839 dropped out. Why?" I don't know any school that does that, but it forced me to start thinking about why aren't we doing that? So Pop's insight was critical to me. It was one of those transformational moments. So the challenge that we have, we talked about this 8 million, and that here's your share, and that to make this, you're really going to have to do something different. You just can't keep going on doing what you're doing because you're not going to grow out of it. So when we look at the time to degrees, we're seeing that more and more students are taking longer and longer to get through. So you're trying to make sure that they get through in the most efficient manner. And what we're finding is too many choices with too little guidance. Most colleges have more than 100 programs. Y'all have close to 100 programs. And have hundreds, if not thousands, of courses. At Florida State College at Jacksonville, 176 programs, 2,933 courses. And as a result, most students are uncertain about their career interests. And what we know, because there's a 500 to 1 ratio at most colleges, 500 students to 1 advisor, that 45% of the students haven't seen an advisor by the 3rd week of class. I shared with the other group that when I graduated from college, it wasn't until my senior year at the university that I saw an advisor. Again, I'm a first-generation student. I didn't know I was supposed to see an advisor. So again, when we look at the causes of excess hours, 31% of the causes from excess hours are a result of students making poor choices. We've got to realize that we've got to do a better job of advising our students and more aggressively about connecting to those students so they make fewer of these bad choices to reduce their time to degree. So why are we falling short? Y'all have seen this before. So what does all this mean that I've talked about? You got your graduation rate of 12.2, your theoretical of 13.3, and your maximum. You definitely have a POS issue associated, so that's the reason why your graduation rate is lower. You have a program length issue. Your certificate programs are not well utilized, and I really don't know why, besides auto-pop. It could be related to the POS issues. It could be related to the structure and length. You've got retention issues, and those are fairly significant. Typically, I would expect a college to be in the low to mid 60s for full-time students, and to be somewhere in the mid 50s for their part-time students. And you have a credit hour yield issue. And when I say a credit hour yield issue, I had to generate several computer program or projections on your institution to do the theoretical yield. And the issue is your institution nor the state of Ohio breaks out what the average yield is for a full-time student and what the average yield of a part-time is. And if your institutional effectiveness wants to add 2 measures that will really help you, it's those 2 measures. And so I have to go in and run simulations until I get a simulation that appears to match your own metrics that you have here. And it appears that your typical part-time student at your institution is taking between, the median would be somewhere between about 8.5 to 11 credits per year. 8.5 to 11 credits per year. And a lot of times when I talk with faculty and advisors and administrators, they think their part-time students are taking 18 credit hours a year. It's not uncommon for me to see an institution where it's 3 to 6. So again, that's part of the issue. And so there'll be some strategies that we'll talk about for advising for impact. And specifically, we'll talk about some big ideals. 3 critical elements. First of all, before you start, you're going to have a champion. Some individuals are going to have to step up and lead. And you need to start doing something other than smiley faces. And what I say about smiley faces, this was my complaint at Jacksonville. We would always do the smiley face thing. Right after registration, we'd hand the students a card and they'd mark their smiley face. And we'd be 4 or 5 smiley faces. And then a semester later, we'd do Noel Levitt's. And Noel Levitt's would say, what do you think about your college registration experience? And they basically say, on a scale of 1 to 5, Likert scale, y'all were a 1. What's the disconnect? Well, the smiley face thing right after the transaction is really not the best time to do the survey. That's one. And if I'm over student services and I'm trying to make my metrics look good, that might be a strategy I use, but it's really not one that I want to be making decisions on. And then you need a team of individuals across your curriculum that are committed to meet regularly and have blunt, sometimes blunt, but open discussions where you're not going to take it personal. One of my best supervisors was my last VPI that I had at Jacksonville. And Don and I were 2 country boys. He's an old country boy from Mississippi. I think that's probably the reason why we gelled. But literally, we could have conversations like we looked like both adders. Our necks were puffed out, where we get to the point where we were talking about the consistency of the other person's brain. It really kind of went down. And then 30 minutes later, we're best of buds. We would have honest, sharp disagreements, but we hurt each other, and we never hurt each other. And so that's one of the things that will have to happen if you're going to make significant changes in your advisement process. And one of the things that you need to look at is program maps. The research is really clear on this. You need to have all students declare a program major and have graduation plans. In other words, they can't sign up for a class until they do this. And then what you're going to do is you're trying to reduce unnecessary course taking. One of the things I've heard about is transfer policies, and specifically I'm talking about articulation agreements, making that easier for students to come in. I know your faculty are taking attendance, but that needs to be a tripwire. By tripwire, I mean if Johnny misses 2 consecutive classes, there needs to be commitment on the part of the faculty to let the advisors know, and then the faculty member also needs to be picking up the phone. But that's hard to do when you have a lot of adjunct faculty. So who's going to step up and take up the slack for that adjunct faculty? You're doing this next one, providing incentives for full-time enrollment. I'm really pleased with what y'all are trying to accomplish. And y'all be one of the colleges that I'll come back to benchmark. I talked about my S-curve generator and how it looks at various patterns. And I'm going to be looking at a pattern for these incentives because I don't have many schools I've worked with that do these financial incentives. And so I'm trying to see what characteristics develop out of your data sets when we get them. You need to use summer. We talked about that. If it's possible, use technology to reduce seat time. We discussed in the first one about using hybrids And the question someone asked me was about we have trouble getting students in hybrids. Well, how are you going to get students in hybrids? Now, we recognize we have the problem. So what are the strategies that we can look at? So what I would do is run a small focus group on some heavy users of hybrid courses to find out why they did it, and then use a focus group on folks who never have taken some hybrid courses and find out why they haven't, to begin to formulate those strategies. And then expand the pathways for students to earn college credits early. And that's some of the things that you're doing with the Early College Initiative. We've had early college down in Florida for 5-7 years. A dear friend of mine, Richard Rhodes, who's now the president of Austin Community College, when he was at El Paso, Richard, the reason I love Richard is Richard has a master's degree in accounting, and he likes margaritas. And we met at a bar, and we found out he was the president, and I found out he had a degree in accounting. And of course, I also asked the obvious question: how in the world did you end up as a college president? And Richard was the first school in the U.S. to do early college. And El Paso has 5 early colleges. And it's absolute, if you get a chance to go to El Paso to look at them, it'll make the hair on your head stand up. It's just extremely dynamic. But again, that's an example of expanding pathways for students to early credit. These maps, what you're doing with these maps is you're showing by every term what specifically the student's going to take. And the student isn't choosing the course. The course is being chose for the student. And what I would do is look at doing registration holds if a student doesn't take underwater basket weaving in the term that y'all have outlined for that student to take underwater basket weaving. I describe our approach as the Mississippi. Most of our programs, with the exception of beloved Allied Health and the beloved nursing, most of our programs allow people to come in at any time, just like the Mississippi does. That hasn't worked. Why are we still doing it? Where nursing and allied health learned long ago, cohort's the way to go. And so maybe you should look at cohort strategies, two cohorts a year, one in the fall, one in the spring. And how would you set that up? And then requiring a student to talk with advisors. That school that I can't quite pronounce, that's in Orlando, the one that has the V, you absolutely cannot sign up for a course, regardless of how much money you've got in your back pocket, until you've had a conversation with an advisor who's going to, and I hate using this word too because they've flogged it to death, their life map, okay? But I've actually ripped off life map. I just renamed it. So, but again, it's a really good plan for how you can get through at Valencia. How many were in the last meeting? Okay, y'all keep your hands down. This is a required element by the state of Florida, specifically put on me by the Disney Corporation. If you had a favorite, for people who are new, if you had a favorite fairy tale, and it has to be a Disney character, what would it be to describe Terra State Community College? Come on, it's open here. What do you think?
Sleeping Beauty or Mickey Mouse is what we got over here.
Sleeping Beauty, Mickey Mouse. We had Beauty and the Beast. Well, last time we had Sleepy. I can't remember the other ones. What? Seven Dwarfs. Beauty and the Beast. Frozen. Okay. Well, here's what I think my choice would be. Pinocchio. And the reason for that is when I look in your catalog, there's no plan outlined for the students in your catalog for the order they should take the courses. You've got the listing of all the courses, but you don't say this should be done in the fall, or label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Take them in this order. You're not helping the student at all in planning their schedule, and you've got first-generation students. For those that weren't in here, you can get this slide from Jack. If you're trying to determine how many semesters that a student is required to graduate on time, up at the top, the gold standard is the official U.S. Department of Education formula that you're supposed to use. This is Jim's common sense formula that you can use. And if you're wanting to use a part-time tool, this is for internal. A part-time tool is trying to give you an idea of how long it would take a part-timer to get through your program. There was a really good question that came up in the last meeting. I'm in favor of no ranges, but let me tell you the reason for that. If you say that it's going to take 3 years and you've got a range, usually what you'll find when you map it, if that range bumps you to 1 more semester, so instead of 3 years or 9 semesters, counting summer, it takes you 10, the range is bad. If, on the other hand, the range still keeps you in those 9 semesters, the range is good. So when I say all ranges are bad, that's my quick elevator speech to really try to get you to cut it back. But when you begin to lay it out, see if it adds an extra semester. If it adds an extra semester, by God, get rid of the range. But if it doesn't, you're in good shape. The keys to these implementation is that the students aren't discovering the right path. Students don't need permission to register for courses on their schedule. But they do need permission to register for courses that are not on their schedule. So what you're doing, again, is setting up every course basically as a restricted access course so that the system is catching them and blocking them. Prerequisite courses, you have to design those prerequisite courses so they're taking it the semester prior. So you have to be very cautious in ensuring that you caught all your prerequisites in your programs and that these courses should be taken in that sequence. There should be a rhyme and reason why you laid your courses out in a semester sequence. Why are you letting people jump all over the board? Okay. And then this is the one that Jack's going to squirm a little about, but you ought to guarantee the courses in the sequence. There's a gentleman that used to be at Montgomery College in Texas. He's now the president of St. Pete College. He was the first president in the United States that started guaranteeing his schedules. I think you need to be careful when you guarantee your schedule. And the reason I say you need to be careful is the problem that they ran into Montgomery is they got into fiscal issues because they were guaranteeing everything they threw up. And they weren't being systematic and planned. When he went to Tallahassee, he refined his method. Now he's at St. Pete. And at St. Pete, they have a very thoughtful process for how they go about guaranteeing a schedule. At Montgomery, if they said they were going to offer underwater basket weaving at 8 o'clock and it didn't make, they put everybody in an online course. Yeah, somebody just cringed. That didn't really work. By the time he got to St. Pete, he was guaranteeing the course and the modality. So he would say, we're going to offer it in the fall, and it's going to be in this modality, and so we will guarantee this course. If you want to start out small, those in the last group learned about critical path, how you can map out the critical path. Just guarantee the courses in the critical paths. This is the most important thing that comes out of this, is no student should be an undeclared major. Those who can't decide get defaulted automatically. I mean, you'd say we're going to put you in liberal arts. But whatever your undeclared major code is, a year from now, they should be 0. Okay? This is the tool I ripped off from Stark State. And this is the first start. This is the first start. In fact, if you go to Stark State's catalog, this is what you see in their catalog. And it very clearly shows, here's the course, here's the prerequisite and the co-requisite that may be assigned with this, and this is the notes. And then they also have advising sheets that are based off of this. Now, the great thing when I do a curriculum review at Stark, I can do a curriculum review at their institution in about a quarter of the time I could at yours, because it's the way this is laid out. Easy to use. Go to Stark State, load down the template, or get Jack to give you the template that I provided, and put your name on it, trademark it, because they haven't done it yet. In terms of developing advising strategies for part-time, again, that test, 65% of your students are what? Part-time, good. And, that's wrong school numbers. 65% are part-time, 35% are full-time. I'll go by this slide real quick because that's the wrong numbers. And nationally, the reason I've got this is I couldn't determine what your distribution was in terms of course load, and I wanted to give you a feeling for what a part-time loads are looking like. So what I ended up doing was getting the national data, and again, where y'all are probably going to be in terms of part-time enrollment over in this side is from about 9 to about 11. But you can begin to see that nationally, what you have is about 35% of your students, 37%, are taking less than 11 hours. And that is in terms of the fall semester. And when you look at full-time load, you see it maybe is not quite as robust as sometimes we think it is. Usually when you ask people what a full-time load is, they'll tell you 30 credit hours in a year. What you're really finding is a lot are hitting around 24. And the reason for this will be clear in just a second. It's taking me a long time to get built up. So again, the median length, I point out again that only 11% of your programs are short. And so it's taking your students 4 to 4.3 years to graduate from your programs. So what's happening is the vast majority of your programs, in this particular case, 65% of your students, are actually taking longer to graduate than they should. And part of that is because of this full-time to part-time retention rate, which is 40% for full-time and 33% for part-time. I would be concerned about the part-time. That's an 18% gap. That's statistically significant. So begin to focus your strategies on some part-times, because the longer it takes, the more life gets in the ways for these students. And we've already talked about how the fact is that only 35% of your graduates are full-time students. Yet that's 65% of your population. It's vastly not carrying their weight of production, and I hate to call it that, but I'll call it that they should. Now, y'all are doing the 15 to finish, and you're setting up strategies to do that. And that's good. That's really good. I have reservations. That's the reason I'm going to be watching y'all to see how it works out. And my reservations are, if I'm taking 6 hours a semester as a part-time, how realistic is it to expect me to get up to 15? Not happening. And so, and that's been some of the criticisms of this CCA strategy that's out. What we found out, and this came out last week, so this is hot off the press. And the reason that this is important, this is enrollment intensity study that was done by the National Clearinghouse just last week, 4.9 million in, looked at 4.9 million student records. And if you haven't heard NFT, it stands for non-first-time student cohorts. What a non-first-time student is this student that has been at an educational institution before, maybe yours, they may be a swirl, they may have swirled out, swirled back in, they may have come to you from a different institution. The study started out originally looking at the difference between full-time and part-time enrollment of this NFTs. But when they started teasing out the data, they saw something happening, and that is mixed enrollment, where a student would go to school full-time for a semester, then part-time, and maybe full-time again. And specifically what they found out is that these mixed enrollment students were 1.5 times more likely to complete an associate's degree than a full-time student. 1.5 times. Much higher retention rate with that group of students. Much higher, meaning on the part of almost 1.5 standard deviation difference. And they were 5 times more likely to still be enrolled at that college when they came back to revisit a year later. Now, what is mixed enrollment? Well, I went in and started trying to figure out what are they talking about. And what it looked like the major trends were what I call the A-B strategy. I've got a student who's mixed, who's an NFT. In the fall semester, they sign up for 3 hours in the A session, 3 hours in the B session. They're doing 6 hours a semester. In the spring, they signed up for 3 hours in the A session, 3 hours in the B session. They're still a part-time student. In the summer, they signed up for 3 hours in the A session, 3 hours in the B session, and now they're being classified as a full-time student for the summer. So what was cool was when you look at Cliff Adelman's work that he did back in 2000 in Toolbox Revisited, this ratio where he talks about continuous enrollment, that ratio is right there. So essentially they verified Dr. Adelman's work, who's at the U.S. Department of Education. So what it means for you is there an A-B strategy that you can utilize, and specifically during the summer, so that you're getting some of the benefits for what would traditionally be called a part-time student for us, so that they could take more hours. The other tool that you can use is what I call the +3. This is the strategy, what's that book, Something for Dummies? This is my strategy, so it's Gym for Dummies approach. And a +3 strategy is just what it says. What you're trying to do is increase the number of hours that every student takes at your college by 3. No more. So that student who's taking 9 hours a year, is it possible that we could get out of them? It's more feasible than getting 30. Okay? And that full-time student who's taking 24 hours, could we get 27 from them? So with each student, you keep trying to add just 3 hours a year, and usually you're trying to get them to add 3 hours during the summer. Because in the summer, what do we say? For every credit hour they take, according to Dr. Adelman's work, they will increase the probability that they will graduate by 15 percentage points. So if they take 3 classes, you've increased the probability that they're going to graduate from your college by 45%. So instead of a 12%, what you now have is almost an 18% graduation rate. So how does that work? Well, when you look at this +3 strategy, and I went back with your various cohorts that I had data for and modeled this, what you're picking up with a +3 strategy, and the +3 strategy is right here. This is trying to get the people to graduate within the 150%. The blue is within 2 years. You're going to pick up, depending on if you're looking at just a 2-year or a 3-year graduation, this college could pick up 18 to 48 additional college or degrees seeking associate degree graduates. Okay? We're not talking about certificates. We're talking about associate degrees. And right now, that would be almost a 25% increase in the number of graduates that you're producing in your associate degrees. Now, will every student do a +3? No. When we first tried it, we didn't have a name for it at Tomball. We called it the free pizza strategy, because that's how it started. We did VIP registration. VIP registration was before regular registration started, and if you were already enrolled, you got a little 2-week window where you could register. And what we did is, if you registered during this 2-week window, our cafeteria, they were the ones that came up with the idea, you would get a free slice and a soft drink. You know, I can have you killed by a college student for a piece of pizza. They're really motivated. And we started promoting that, and we started seeing our yield increase. And it's not increasing by big amounts, but it was that small incentive. And by the way, we ended up making money on that deal, because when they went to get one slice, what would they do? Buy another slice. Yeah, yeah. So it was a win-win. Win-win for the student, win-win for the college. So again, additional graduates can come from this +3 strategy. The other thing you need to do in terms of the big picture is intervene early. I talked about early alert strategies, early alert systems, and I'm not a big proponent of them. And the reason I'm not a big proponent of them is all of us have bought them, or at least down in my part of the world, typically $60,000 to $100,000, and they're neither early nor they alert. They just haven't worked. And the reason is we're not using predictive analytics and to really identify the students. We're relying on reactive analytics to identify them after the barn door has been open. And that's a little bit too late. So what you're trying to do is intervene early and use some predictive analytics to do those early interventions. And there are some good programs out there. I talked a little bit about a program that's done by an Austin-based company called Civitas. And Civitas, of course, that was at Valencia College. Before the students even walk into the class for the first time, 95% predictability. And every day, Valencia downloads their student data to Civitas, and Civitas runs it through their analytics and sends them back updated reports. What's great, if you're a faculty member at Valencia, you can look at your computer screen, and of course you've got what I described as the green, the yellow, and the red student, but you also have a relationship matrix. And because all their courses are taught in their LMS system, they're pulling how often the student interacts. And so what you see is this graphical interpretation of, is this student interacting with us? So if Jim is red, and you look at the interaction map and Jim is way out here, then Jim needs something to be able to pull Jim in. The advising strategies we talked about, the W's and the L's. But in terms of an early alert system, what I want to tell you is that, first of all, that's a huge reason for excess hours. That's 51% of the reasons for excess hours. W's and L's. And those individuals should be fairly easy for you to identify. In fact, I want to tell you about this system I've got. This is the Jim Simpson Common Sense Early Alert System, okay? This is my hometown. Anybody ever been to Texhoma? Okay, cool. It's 3 people, 3. 2, one in Springfield, one here, and one at another location I found that know about Texhoma. This is Main Drag, by the way. And if you're going to where I used to live, go down this road 63 miles, make a left, 5 more miles, that's my house, okay? That's where I went to school. Now imagine you're sitting on Main Street, Texhoma, and you see how busy it is right now. And you're counting green pickup trucks, okay? And John Deere green's a real popular color in that part of the world, and you got green pickup trucks going by every day, all the time. And suddenly you get an International Harvester red go by. You think you could pick out the red pickup? Okay, well, I call this system the red pickup early alert system, okay? Your students who have W's and F's, they're the red pickups, easily defined. If you've got a student who, by the grace of God, earned 20% W's or 20% F's, and who showed up at this college to register for classes this spring, you ought to be able to pick them out pretty easy. And you can begin intervention right now because they're in trouble. Pick up the phone, call them, get them in to see the advisors. So one of the things I want you to remember is don't always get tied up in the technology that's out there. A little common sense will go a long ways towards advising students. And if you implement the red pickup early alert system and it works, just make sure you put a TM so it's been trademarked and we'll be in good shape. Advising questions, again, it goes back to the student yield. Out of 58 colleges, I've only been to 2 that track student yield. And when I talk about tracking student yield, I want to know how many credit hours are being taken by full-time, part-time. I want to know race, gender, about those students. Because you will see definite patterns emerge. And you need to know that. Because you can begin to predict early. If little Jimmy is only signing up for 3 credit hours a semester, little Jimmy has about 1% probability that he's going to graduate. So let's pull Jim in and have a conversation. And Jim may not know he's at risk. And so let's have that conversation. The same thing goes about summer. I was surprised how few people knew about Cliff Edelman's work and the importance of summer in a retention strategy or a graduation strategy for a program. More importantly, I'm surprised at the number of faculty members that don't know about it. And I'll tell you, I think every single student that comes to Terra State should know the importance of summer. That this is a way to get through the program quicker, faster, and be more successful at your institution. Likewise, you know, y'all really need to start thinking about maybe requiring English in the first 12 hours. Yes, sir.
You've documented your work with the Department of Education around gainful employment. What that is like, and working with the department, that you think will get your help?
God, I hope so. We had a conversation about that last night. One of the most irate things that happened to me, or happened, was, what was it, 3 years ago we had year-round Pell. They kept it for 1 year. And the rationale that the department gave for discontinuing it, besides money, was that we didn't produce any graduates after 1 year. Well, duh. You know, and literally, one of my connections that I have at the department, he's since retired, and was over the Pell. I called him and said, and he said that, and my reply was, well, duh. You know, I mean, what part of 60 hours do you not get? And I can look at Jacksonville's retention rates, and I can actually point out the segment that's attributable to year-round Pell. I could see it making a difference. Right now, as I talk about it, my hair on my arms are standing up. I got excited about it. President Obama's promise, I love it, but if we can't get the promise, give me year-round Pell, period. And I would be happy, but it's a good question, insightful of what you saw. Late registration, I'm going to ask you to take that step. You know, I said you got to take that blind step. You know, Tara really needs to have a serious conversation about whether you're going to continue to allow late registration. And if you are, then how are you going to adjust? Meaning, if you're going to allow late registration, then I will tell you now, those students need intervention at that point. It's not that you won't be able to that you could keep late registration, but you can't keep late registration and not do anything with those students who are registering late, because you already know they're at much higher risk of not being successful. The other thing I'm going to ask you to take a look at is VIP registration. This was an interesting story that came out of Texas Tech. Margaret's study had an N of about 84,000. So it's kind of a smallish study, but it was significant. It's been duplicated on once before, and it was unintentional what she found out. What she was trying to prove in her dissertation was that students who register for classes late don't do as well. Okay, you know, Margaret, duh, we know that. What she found out, though, was VIPs, that those students who register earlier than regular registration, so that VIP period, you know, where we gave away the free pizza, those students have significantly higher student success rates, both in terms of course completion, less student withdrawals, and retention than regular registration. So how much does pizza cost here? Okay. What we did in Tomball, pizza for the spring registration. For the fall registration that we did in the spring, we used to cook hot dogs. We called it We Serve Students. And so if you registered early, you got Jim Simpson as your personal chef on the hot dog wagon. And it worked well. We actually had a hot dog wagon. So don't, you know, you got to have some sizzle in your marketing, literally. But again, it's a way of pushing incrementally up your retention levels. You might not have a big retention gain, but you will have some. This again is part of Margaret's, and Jack has these slides, but again it shows lower retention rates associated with the regular registration. And look how much higher these returning students, 80%. Man, that's significant. Love this work that Margaret did. Build better systems. You need to begin to start building capacity to predict students that aren't going to be successful. And we've talked about some. We talked about those 20% W's, those 20% L's. Did little Jimmy complete 20 credit hours in a given year? These are simple statistics. Did they go to summer school? That you can start running on your students, that you don't need to spend $60,000 on a predictive analytics, but you know some of these attributes are going to lead to success, and some of them will lead to failure if they don't achieve them. This is the thing that always amazes me. Advisors know this. A lot of times our faculty don't. Most attrition is not caused by academic failure. It is in the nursing program. I saw the look, and I knew exactly where you're going, and you're absolutely correct in that regard. you know, if the student passes, they're going to get graduated. But if they fail, I don't want them, you know, if they fail dosage, don't put them close to me. But over 40% of the attrition is not related to grade. These are students who are good students. That life is happening and someone needs to reach out and touch them and find out why. So students have to see an advisor. My recommendations is that you set it up so they have to see it before they register. That you establish some milestone courses in a program that you want established at X point. And if they don't establish it at X point, they have to see an advisor. If they fall 2 or more courses behind on that map I talked about, they have to see an advisor. If they have a grade point level or grade point of 2.0 or less, do y'all make them come see an advisor at that point? That's good, because they need to see an advisor. You know, that one year that I enjoyed my sophomore year so much at college, no advisor contacted me. I guess they thought a person with a 0.6 GPA wasn't going to be around long. So here are some predictive measures, and this is a restatement of what you've seen before. But these are measures that you can use to create your own low-cost, common-sense, early advising alert system at your college. If you're looking at your high school students before they enroll, if they have multiple 9th grade failures, first of all, you're going to be real lucky if you see them. But if they show up at your college, before they even enroll, they're at risk. Know that. A failure to take a math course in the senior year is a predictor of failure. In Florida, we didn't require math be taken into the senior year until this past year for our high school students. It was optional. I don't know what it is in Ohio. Are they requiring a math in the senior year? Yes, that's great. Hopefully it's Algebra 2, and a B or higher is a predictor of success. A high school GPA below a B is a really strong predictor that the student's going to have problems. And so early intervention is warranted. And then students who have any type of accelerated credit is a predictor of success. And specifically, if you can get them to 12 hours, 12 hours is almost like the golden bullet. There hasn't been a research study that I have not seen that shows low student success rates, meaning graduation rates, with high school students that walk in with at least 12 hours of college credit that they've received through things like AP, CLEP, dual enrollment, or articulated credit. This is a controversial strategy, and unfortunately I was one that told a school that maybe asked in 150 how to do it. And I only recommend this strategy as one if you're trying to take a bite size out of the problem you want to solve. You may not know it, but most of your education. Your microphone's on. I'll just put that down. First time in the day I've been warm. That's good. You may not know it, but just 16% of your students at this institution determine most of your academic accomplishment. Okay? It's the full-time, first time in college that most of the statistics that are used at the state level, at the national level, at the Aspen level, that are used to evaluate the quality of your program. These students are easy to identify. Why are they easy to identify? You got to do it for your data submissions. You know who these students are. So what I would say, if you're going to do a pilot project, work with this group right here. Here's why. You can see within a year, because we're specifically tracking data elements like graduation retention on this group, and it makes life easier for you, and it makes life easy on you because you can say, I did X. Did we get any movement in X? These students are easy to identify. Now, the college in Texas that got named in the Aspen Award, I did this type of presentation for the college, and the president pulled me aside and said, Jim, so you're telling me if I concentrate on my FTICs, I can really move my rates? And I said, yeah. And he thought for a minute, and it's a small college. He only had 153 FTICs. And he had 200 employees. And so he said, I'm going to assign an employee to every FTIC. And he's made the Aspen group for 3 years in a row. Now, would I send my child to that school? Probably not, because all of his focus is on this group now, and they're not really paying attention up here as much as they should. But again, it's a good way to pilot. And again, Sandy Schugert at that school that starts with a V, this is where they always start. You know, one of the little nasty data secrets back when we were doing remediation on Valencia, if you were in 2 or more remediation classes, you couldn't sign up for more than 12 credit hours. Now, why? You're no longer in the denominator for determining their graduation rates. That was a little sleazy, but now we're kind of in an open book in terms of not requiring it. But remember this strategy, because 573 students is a lot fewer to do pilot tests on than 3,000 students, and can give you a bite-sized approach to it. Contact students. Let every student know they're monitoring your progress. I can't tell you how important it is for you to send an email saying we're watching you. I know it sounds kind of creepy, but it's a way to do it. I know you're looking at CRMs. Hopefully you'll use something like Constant Contact that you could do it with. Sending congratulatory notes that students who do well. Hey, congratulations, Jim. And we see you went from a 0.6 grade point average to a 3.2 this year. You know, ask if everything is okay. One of the schools I have uses Constant Contact. They've linked it to their CRM. And if a student's grade point average falls below 0.25, message is automatically sent, goes into the alert file of the advisors. So again, this messaging is automatic for these students. And additional intervention, again, we talked if it falls below 2.0. Does anybody remember Peanuts? And the doctor is in, Lucy? This is the doctor is in strategy. And the school that implemented it actually had a little cart that looked like Lucy's, that had advisor is in. Few students actually go to the advisors between the desires, but they're available, and the students are congregating out in the library over in this, what was that building? Student activities building. And so what they did was they built them this little cart, the advisors within, with a laptop, and at noon you'd see them over in the cafeteria. During off hours you would see them where the students would congregate. And there was wherever there was a student, you'd see the little cart following after them. Okay? Sounds a little funny now, but it was effective. And what you're doing is getting them out wherever the students are is where your advisors need to congregate with. Lessons learned. Well, we started out what seems like 3 days ago talking about this model. And what I want you to encourage you to do is when you're looking at completion, what you need to do is look holistically at the strategies that you're following. And know there's going to be some impacts. One of the impacts that we experienced in Jacksonville is plan for a large number of graduates. You know, we didn't plan for a large number of graduates the year that we increased the number of graduates by 42%. How do you place another 900 students in jobs? The placement office came pounding on my door saying, why didn't we know about the plans? And I'm going, well, I didn't know I was going to have a 42% increase. But plan on that now because it's going to happen. If you were to talk with Anthony at Pillissippi, the year that they went from like 1,500 to 3,000, he didn't plan on it. And he said it was crazy. Because, you know, first of all, they were using a smaller facility to graduate in, and suddenly they had to get a bigger place. There were other ramifications to having a large number of graduates. So if you're going to have 3,000 people walk across the stage at Terra State, where are you going to have graduation at? Start thinking about it. If you're going to have another 600 graduates per year, how are you going to get them all placed? Start thinking about it. Because you'll need to plan for those success. Because what I don't want you to do, the rule of thumb I've always followed in programs, if you butcher one graduation class of a new program, it's going to set you back 3 years. So you got to get it right with that graduation class. And the first graduation class you get it right, you can start reducing marketing on that program. Because what happens, Jim says, man, you know, I studied for underwater basket weaving and I got a job in the field and it's paying me $19 an hour. He tells his friends and it begins to generate, and after a while you're not having to spend any marketing on that program because the students are doing that for you. Biggest lesson learned, you need to constantly and consistently talk about how important graduation is. At Jacksonville in Central Florida, every team meeting that I was involved in with our core operating teams, we talked about graduation. It was always constant, foremost. We were showing what our projections were against what what was actually beginning to develop, what our major milestones were. When we talked to students, it was always with advising about the importance of graduation and why they needed not to do some things, do other things. So consistently doing that message would be most appreciative. By the way, this picture has been with me for 10 years now. This is a graduate, a picture of a graduate at the University of Central Florida, where I did some work with. And I think basically summarizes what I've been trying to do today. Because he's pointing, and he's pointing at you. Because these students aren't going to be able to graduate without your help in the classroom, advising, making sure there's adequate resources to help you get them through. But they're relying on you. So the question to me, for you, is what's your number? What's your number? Questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a ratio of number of advisors to number of students that you recommend?
Not unless I have like 12 steps on Jack for the run for the car. Now, you know, we all complain about a 500 to 1 ratio, but there's some recommendations that are out, but I've never seen research that says this is what specifically is done or needed. What I will tell you is we tend to see better results with program-specific advisors. We tend to see better results. One of the things we're piloting it with the Excel It program, is an outreach coordinator. And the reason that's important, and the deans will appreciate this, is one of the things I experienced as both a dean and an executive dean was part of my responsibility was outreach to the community. And, you know, I live in a state with a lot of alligators. And there are times when I couldn't see the edge of the swamp because of all the alligators chomping around me. And we experimented by hiring an outreach coordinator to help go out to the community and to prospect with employers and then basically bring back those high quality prospects for us to work with, for our team to work with. And I was about to cuss. It worked. It worked. And I say that surprisingly because when I started, they'd already had this in place, and I didn't really think it was going to be successful. I'll give you an example. We did a career chat on logistics. It was already in the works before I got there. It was done by our outreach coordinator, had good industry support. We had 5 industry people to talk with the students. And, you know, part of the reason I showed up, because they had it in a room that said 120. I'm a big guy, so I could fill some space. So I was, you know, there to at least make the room look fuller is really why I went. I had kind of low expectations. Of our student population at our college showed up for that event. Not only did we have to open up an overflow room, but we had to add the media on the fly so they could see what was happening in this room. And I was convinced that all these students would walk out. So after we got everybody organized, I kind of stayed back with a little tally, and I was going to count how many did we lose. We lost less than a dozen. About 350 students showed up at that event. Yeah, wow. We've since done a couple more career chats. We had one on entrepreneurship that attracted 225 people. And we've got one that we're doing on automation simulation where we've invited not only all of our students, but 1,200 community members, and we don't really know what to expect. Now, those types of activities, if I was a dean, you know, I would have pulled out all my hair. But this was part of their responsibility, and we're doing it for $27,000 plus benefits. So there's ways that we can leverage these assets. And as I've told everybody, the first thing I've learned about this project that we're working on, and the gentleman's name is Todd, we need more Todds. If I was back at my other institution, Todd would definitely be on the Perkins budget. And had 5 campuses, and we would have had 5 Todds coordinating this outreach, helping the deans so that this is a more natural part of what they're trying to do. Those are the types of things that we can do. Can I point to a specific success because of Todd in terms of impacting retention? I can't at this time, but my gut is we're getting students engaged, and anytime we get students engaged, we see higher rates of student success. Ask me 3 years from now, and I might be able to tell you, we'll call it the Todd strategy, and the need for this type of outreach coordinator. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Currently, we don't use W's or completion rates into our calculation of probation suspension for academic probation suspension. Should we?
Wish this was a Corona. Man, you're coming up with good questions. Okay. I'm going to answer this 2 ways. This, first of all, Jim, the college student who actually had the .60 GPA one semester? I would say no. Jim, the educational administrator, yeah, it should be factored in. It's factored in the standards of academic progress, and I believe there should be more correlation between SAP and SOAP, or whatever acronym y'all call your standards of academic progress here, or for on the academic side of the house. But yes, if it's used in SAP, it should be something that we're addressing even with the students who are not financial aid. Other questions? Okay, feedback time. What did you think about this module? And be honest. Specifically if you're an advisor. Did I do anything new?
Well, I'm not an advisor, but I do work in Michigan. I thought it was great, some of the points that you brought up. I mean, we do use some of those things that you're talking about. However, we don't use them in the way that you're talking about.
Okay.
We don't make our students come in. We have the plans laid out for them. These is what the classes should take. However, we don't say this is what the classes you're going to take. You know, we let them kind of still fish their way through there and do what they want.
So they're still doing the Mississippi.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you know, that's one of the things. Now, the constant contact, we are using that. So it's something that, and we're not using it again the way you're talking about using it. We don't send out to our students and tell them how great they're doing. It's probably something we should, you know, let them know. I mean, you know, we had somebody in our office yesterday who kind of mad that she would have made the dean's list. We would have had one for 6-hour students because she's making straight A's, and she was upset that she didn't get a letter from me.
Oh, jeez.
So, you know, I mean, it kind of hit home a couple of things we were talking about.
Is there a reason that we don't have a dean's list for a 6-hour student?
You know, again, that's way above my pay grade.
Well, no, that's a good question. I mean,
Stay out of that.
what does the dean's list cost us? Is my question, and what's the main? Okay.
Where we implemented a dean's list for part-time students and a reception for them, and we couldn't believe. And I think actually one of the deans over there, Andy Carroll, might have come to that dean's list for part-time students, the dean's list reception for part-time students. And the people that were in your undergraduate program really welcomed that opportunity, because most of them were not.
You had a good.
Also had mandatory advising, and in the particular unit where I worked, we increased retention from fall to fall from 67% to 87% in 1 year.
Jesus, that's good. You know, that's great to hear. But again, the question I've got is the reason I got hot was because I was sweating like a dog. Y'all were making me nervous. And I really want to know if this one, do I need to revamp? If I need to revamp, what do I need to revamp? Yes.
I would say if you did need to revamp, but the two things you said that really caught my attention was specific advisors for programs, and the other thing was the visibility of the advisors, all the different little pockets of places where they could be, and I don't know how feasible that is for ours.
Well, there's other ways you could do it. At Tomball College, I'll be honest, I'm superstitious, okay? And part of that has to do with my specific heritage I have. We believe in fetishes and things of that nature. And fetishes aren't what y'all are thinking. I heard a snicker, okay? Okay. Yeah, I've got this thing for black socks. And that needs to be edited out of the TV. But at Tomball, I had an instructor that I hired, and I gave her specific targets for graduation, targets for number of students that needed to stay in the program in order for her to maintain her job. And if she hit those targets, I would support her for tenure. And I gave her 4 years to do it. After 18 months, she hit the targets. And so I ended up supporting her for doing it. But one of the things that she did was she walked in one day and said, "Jim, I need $150 to market my program." I didn't have $150 in the budget, yet I've already told her her job depends on this. And so I wrote out a check for $150. And as I was writing it out, I said, Wendy, what are you buying? And she said, pink yard flamingos. And I thought, I don't really like where this is going, but I'm going to go with it. And so she papered the front part of the main entrance of the school with these little cheesy pink flamingos advertising her program. And as soon as she did, suddenly the enrollments in the entire division just blew up. And the pink flamingos became our mascots. In fact, we had the Royal Order of the Pink Flamingo. So if you were a faculty member and you did something outstanding, we had shirts with pink flamingos on them, and we had this little crazy thing with one leg up where we inducted you into the Royal Order of the Pink Flamingo. And it got to be such a big thing, it and Mardi Gras, because we used to do Mardi Gras floats through the campus, which were on these book wagons and throwing beads. It got to be such a big thing that we bought us a neon pink flamingo light to hang in our department window. And our school at that time was like a big mall. And we would advise anybody's student. We didn't care. Every administrative assistant within that department was trained to be an advisor. Every program manager was trained to advise in another program. And they would simply say, go down this hallway, make a right at the Pink Flamingo. And so someone would come, they would say they were undecided. They'd say, go down that hall, make a right at the Pink Flamingo. And I guarantee you, every undecided student, when it came to their social science, got economics, which was in our department. And phys ed was a required course, and it was in the department. And I was over the phys ed department because I was such a hunky-dunky dude. Every student that walked out of there had a phys ed course. So it kind of worked out for us, worked out for the students, and worked out for the advising. So there's things you can do like that to begin to brand and have fun with your programs. And the little dark, deep secret about my paranoia is when I went to Jacksonville, we were having troubles with enrollment. And so in the men's bathroom of every single campus we have at Jacksonville, in the ceiling tile is a pink flamingo. And our enrollments turned around, this is no lie, that fall. So don't knock the power of the pink flamingo, okay? But again, this has to do with branding. We really didn't adopt the pink flamingo at Jacksonville. It was just a combination of things and my paranoia. But we did brand ourselves at Tomball. And students knew they could get advised at the sign of the pink flamingo. So it was a way to have fun with the students. The Mardi Gras floats, guys, beads are cheap. These little book carts, we decorated them up as floats. We'd push them with our Mardi Gras faces on, throwing beads, and people loved our department. So there's some cool things you can do as an institution that will suddenly make, again, look at your Facebook reviews. It doesn't say, man, this is a hip place to go. Some things like that that begin to build community at your schools. Yes, sir.
Feedback for you. I thought, we have transitioned to the, 12 to 15 credits flat tuition rate. But I will say for many of the academic advisors, we very much understand that, we want students to take more credit hours because it equals greater success statistically. But we also have students in their lives in front of us every day, and we also want to do what's best for students. And so I thought really highlighting that +3 strategy was, I think, a good message for academic advisors to work towards something and be able to show students, if you just try to increase your course, the number of credits hours you took by 3, it's just a really useful strategy to talk with students about, to be very direct. Another 3 hours with people that could potentially equal this much more success for you. So I thought that was very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, guys, I've enjoyed it. Thank y'all for voting thumbs up so that I'll get paid for the gig. By the way, I should tell you that this last night, Jack took us out to eat, and Jack was such a gentleman. He kept asking me while the snow was blowing and the blizzard and the snow drifts were getting over my head, which is going to be the story I tell at other places. He kept saying, "Jim, do you need me to pick you up at the hotel to bring you out here?" And I'm going, "No, Jack, I think I can do it." "Jim, do I need you to pick it up?" And when I got up this morning at 4 o'clock and looked at the window, suddenly it dawned on me the reason that he did that was he's afraid I wasn't going to show up. So I do appreciate, this has been a very comfortable group for me. And probably I got too comfortable at times, especially last night with some of the stories we told that need to be kept in secret. Okay. But I thank y'all so much. Strategy. And you've got my email. By the way, if you call me, if I don't have to come on a plane, I don't charge. Period. I'm free. All you have to do is pick up the phone and call me. To let you know what happens between me and my wife with these, 10% of the funds that we collected from here will be donated to Habitat for Humanity in Jacksonville. And then the number of hours that we worked on this project, both my wife and I donate that amount of time to another charity. Usually it's Habitat for Humanity, but also we do pro bono work predominantly for tribal colleges. And so if I spend 69 hours working on this project, and then if I find a pro bono, they'll get 69 hours worth of my time free of charge. So thank you for that.